All right, welcome back to the show, folks. This is our last episode of the year. James and I thought we'd just take stock of 2024 and do a little bit of a look ahead to 2025. We're just going to thank you, our listeners, and do a quick review of where we've been and where we're headed. James, first thing I did, I just did a journal review. I went back through and just looked at journal entries from 2024. I don't cast myself as some sort of disciplined journal person, but I did go back and look at what went on for the last year in my review. And the first thing I noticed was I got a prompt. I use an app called Day One, and I don't get paid to talk about them, but I'm just letting people know what I do for my journaling. I keep everything electronic. Sometimes I will bust out just a straight up notebook that you write down on a piece of paper, and that mechanical writing down of something is helpful. Sometimes I do that, but for the most part, I just use the Day One app either on my computer, laptop, or phone. And I've got some journaling prompts that come up for me. One of the first ones that came up in January last year was this question: what is your biggest dream for the year ahead? And that gave me pause. I had to stop and think. And I had to look back over the year 2023 and just think about where I want to go. And my biggest dreams for the year ahead were, first off, overcoming deprivations. The word deprivations is what came up, and it's just simply referring to a lack of development in my own mind as a person. That is what stuck out. And I realized at the beginning of the year that I needed to overcome my own limitations, the things where I have not developed where I should. As adults, we could look at ourselves and go, I'm on the 60th percentile for being a mature adult. I'm not a mature adult at all. But that was one of the biggest things, overcoming deprivations and developing myself.
I'm just agreeing with you. I think that's one of the things that I see myself and others as adults who need to do exactly that, revisit the things that we didn't learn so well as kids, or things we learned poorly because it wasn't modeled for us or what have you, but ways we can grow ourselves to be more mature.
Yeah, and I look back, and it wasn't that I was neglected or abused or anything like that in childhood, but there were just things that did not develop as they should. And it's nobody's fault. So I'm not sitting here as an adult male looking back at my parents and going, it's your fault. It's just me as a person. There are things that did not develop in my mind, and mentally, emotionally, all of those things. I developed quite well physically, though, a little bit too large. Got to reduce that and get in better shape. But anyways, the deprivations are internal. Another aspect of my biggest dream for the year 2024 was I wanted to get deeper connections with people. And a related topic would be starting this podcast. We did start the podcast in March this year. The episode you're listening to now is episode 14. And I've had a lot of good times here working with you on this, James. So it's been good, man. I've enjoyed it.
Agreed. This has been one of the highlights of the year.
Yeah, we're learning. So looking forward to next year, continuing on with our progress and moving on. There was another prompt in my journal this past January, and the question was, what do you need to embrace about yourself? And that was another one, man. I stopped short, and it was just like, okay. And as humans, we tend to think highly of ourselves, myself included. And there's been so many times where I just regard myself as, oh, well, I'm skilled and I'm this and I'm that. But then in reality, you start encountering other human beings, and they may be more developed in certain areas that you are not. And that's where we start going, well, here's where I need to be developing. Over time, I've learned about myself, and the thing that I needed to embrace about myself was this. In my heart of hearts, deep in my personal being, I just discovered that I'm an insecure, frail, and weak person inside. It may not look like that on the outside, but what we tend to do as people is just put forth these personas that, hey, we've got it all together. We know what we're doing. I've just got my act together, and I'm capable, I'm professional, and you go down the list, and we're good at putting up a facade, but inside we're insecure, frail, and weak. And that's what I had to embrace about myself. The extension of that is just interacting with people, feeling unworthy in my daily interactions with other people. That was something that I have to grapple with on a daily basis. It's like I do well in interacting with people, but just what's happening in my own heart is I'll end up talking to a person and I start telling myself I'm unworthy. I get imposter syndrome and I start going, I have no idea why this person's talking to me and I should not be doing this. And I don't know why I'm here. And then I have this feeling like I need to get away. So that's what is going on with me. And then the outworking of that is capitulation. I tend to just go along with things because feeling unworthy, I don't want to start a battle. I don't want to push back. And that's not a good thing. If you're just capitulating, going along to get along, you're really just being a doormat for others. And that's what I have a tendency to do, just capitulating. And then because bad feelings that come along with that, you start feeling like a doormat and then you withdraw from people and just avoid them. And that's not a good thing, man. I withdraw.
Yeah. Withdrawing, avoidance, that resonates greatly with me as well. Things that I do, that imposter syndrome thing, that is huge. I struggle with it greatly.
Well, I feel that around you. So you're good. I'm sitting here going, why is James talking to me? But seriously, when I'm interacting with you, man, I'm sitting here going, man, I got to get my act together. I got to be better for James. You know, we're working on this podcast together. And
that can be a good driver. I mean, I will admit to the same thing. It's like, I want this to be good for Todd. And ultimately, I do care about what you think.
Yeah. I embrace that about myself, but I need to fix it too at the same time. And that's what I've been working on. And one big topic that I was introduced to through listening to podcasts and other sources is this concept of neuroplasticity. I learned through reading and from listening to other podcasts and things like that is that we do have the ability to train ourselves so that we can rewire our brains. And I was thinking about that and how to illustrate it. And the best thing I can think of is when I went to college, I spent 6 years in the military and then I went to college. And I went through an engineering program at NC State. That 4 years of training literally changed the way my brain works. And I thought differently after graduating from college as a result of that training. And that was proof positive to me that through training, we can rewire our brains. Not within ourselves, but it takes external support from people to help us. But also we can do things like meditative practices that rewire the way our brain works. Neuroplasticity, that is the big topic that came to my mind for 2024. I've been working with a professional, and there have been a lot of different topics that we've touched on, and this relates back to the thing that I need to embrace about myself. And the first thing that I've been working on is internal boundary training. What happened was I'm talking to a counselor, and this guy's a PhD. He really knows this stuff, and he sat with me, my initial meeting with him in 2023, and said, hey, look, need you to do this survey, answer all these questions about yourself. And it was like 2 or 3 hours of answering questions, just random everyday questions, nothing fanciful. But I went through and answered all the questions, and he looked at the survey results and he just went through and he just said, okay, well, here's what's going on. And the first thing he started working on is internal boundary training. And what that means is getting yourself to the place where other people's disapproval does not bother you as much. And so this dude starts digging around in my noggin, man. And I'm just like, it was nothing special, but targeted topics. And he's just like, look, you need to establish boundaries. And I hear people say that, and I kind of recoil a little bit from the word boundaries, but this guy really defined what it means. And he said, yeah, you need to stand up for yourself. You need to, in your own mind, you need to get comfortable with other people's disapproval. And he gave me meditative practices that I can follow. And that was the training. So he worked with me on some things and said, okay, cool. Well, here's what you need to do. And then I'm sitting here taking notes. So I got all these notes and he's like, okay, every day get up and practice this training. And we won't go into the details of it, but it's basically just thinking about certain things, reviewing old memories, and then working through that and getting to the place where you tell yourself, you know what, this is cool. I understand that you're upset with me. I get it, but I've got to work on this. And you say that, it's almost like a mantra. I have more important things to work on as you're reviewing that memory. And what that does is it's like working out at the gym to prepare yourself for daily life. And then what I noticed is that my interactions with other people, I wasn't as worried about their disapproval. And this gets into people pleasing and all of this stuff. And it's actually, if you boil it down, it's a little bit of narcissism, because you're looking to other people and their approval and their liking you is something that validates you. That's not a good thing. That's not healthy. And I realized that is who I am. And that's why I have a conversation with someone. And then after the conversation later that night, I'm thinking about it and I'm worried about what I may have said wrong to offend them or whatever. And they're not thinking about it at all. They've moved on. And
Yep.
So
Indeed.
the guy just keeps hammering home these concepts with me. And then he'll ask me about, okay, hey, what's going on? We start talking and then he takes me back to boundaries. And then he constantly says this. He's like, boundaries are internal for you. You need to establish that boundary in your mind so that you're not bothered by someone else's disapproval. And then he said, with others, you end up setting limits with them. And that's where you're saying no to things. You can have family members, friends, whoever. They kind of encroach on your life with their desires and things that they want to happen. And you have to find a way to be comfortable saying politely, no, I'm not able to do that right now. Internal boundary training. Have you found similar scenarios for yourself with boundaries and working through things?
Definitely working through things. My struggles are a little different, but it's still a daily thing of being aware of what's going on internally for me.
Right.
So that I can better respond to others, be it my wife or kids or whatever. So, and taking that time is important. I just wanted to take a moment to stress as we're talking about working on things. There's sort of two things. One is working on things that you know you need to work on, but which is a little different than where you may have different skills and abilities than somebody else.
Right.
We're kind of not talking about that. That's a different thing that we have to acknowledge as well, is we're all kind of have different skills and abilities and things we're trained for and whatnot. So I think it's important to understand that about ourselves as well, our skills, abilities, limitations, so that we can lean on others. That's a good thing. But this conversation, we're talking about how we improve self-improvement. That's a terrible buzzword.
Yeah. I try not to use buzzwords, but that's it. It's true, man. Self-improvement.
I was trying to avoid that. But it is a buzzword because it's work. It's not improvement, it's work.
Right.
Working on yourself.
Yeah. Here's another word that I don't want to ever use, but it comes up a lot. Intentional. That one comes up. But it's true. It is a good word, but it's just been used so much.
Yep. Overused.
I want to be intentional.
Yeah.
Which is true, but it's like, what does that mean? Internal boundary training is what I've been working on. And that has been helpful. It's helped with my interpersonal relationships everywhere. At work, I am better able to look at another person and say, oh, yes, but here's what I really need to be working on. And what you're talking about, I can't work on that because I'm doing this. Just basic little things like that. And I'm just working with coworkers and they're like, hey, can you call this customer and can you do this and that? And it's like, I could, but that's going to be a half day's worth of work. And these are the more important things that I need to be working on. How do we get this customer taken care of while I get to continue working on these things that you also need me to do? And when you put it out like that, the other person is like, oh, and it's usually a salesperson, and the salesperson wants me to do something. I'm getting better about going, okay, yes, if I do what they want me to do, then I'm going to be working till midnight. I can't do that anymore. And actually, I was instructed not to say can't. I refuse to do that. And that's a different mindset. It's like, no, I'm not going to do that. It's not in my best interest to do that. It's not healthy for me to work till midnight consistently like that. I'm getting better about that. So the internal boundaries, it's something in my head that I'm working on that I look at the other party and just go, you know what? Hey, that is good. However, I need to work on something more important. And that leads into the next thing that this pro has been working on with me. He calls it Coherence Therapy. And this is where we develop negative schemas in our brains. What happens is, as a child, you are interacting with adults, with other parties, and you develop negative schemas in your own brain. So he's been working with me on playing back those memories of negative things that have happened and then working through the process of going, okay, cool, this happened. And you go back into when it happened as a child and how you felt at that point. And then you have to go through and realize, as an adult, I can look back on that and see this is why that happened. And this is how I process this. What you're doing is you're juxtaposing your adult logic against the child logic. So the coherence therapy, it's a meditative practice where you just think about that memory and then you realize the negative schema and then you superimpose the positive on top of that and say, okay, as an adult, I'm going to look back on this childhood memory, impose this adult logic to that framework, and then that helps me grow grow as a person and develop. And that's the deprivation part that comes in. So we develop that negative schema. So there's a lack of development in a particular area mentally. And then we use these meditative practices to fill in the gaps artificially in our minds and help our brains to grow. And then through that process, through neuroplasticity, we're rewiring things in our brain. And so that was another thing that he's been working on with me, coherence therapy.
Nice.
It's been educational. It's been helpful. And then in my interactions with other human beings, what he laid out for me was this, the master state versus sympathy state. And there's also parallel, it's telic state versus paratelic states. And we've talked about this in a previous episode, but he instructed me, he's like, look, when you're interacting with someone, you got to think about what state you're in. If you're talking to your wife, are you in a mastery state where you're trying to get it right? Are you white knuckling it? Are you sitting there going, I don't want to say the wrong thing and make my wife mad? Or alternatively, are you in a sympathy state where you're honestly just curious about what the other party is thinking? And that just changed relationships for me. My marriage, also with other parties. I'm not perfect at it, but I'm better able to sit there when I'm talking to someone and think, what state am I in? Am I trying to get this right? Am I waiting for them to stop talking so I can just throw my next piece of information out there? Or am I honestly sitting here listening to what they're saying and trying to learn something? And am I trying to understand where they're coming from? So that sympathy state, that has been revolutionary for me. And it's nothing major, dude. It's nothing major.
Yeah. It's one of those things that it's both simple yet complex.
Yeah. And as I was thinking about it, when I was in the Marines, dude, I was already married. I'd been married for like 2 years, maybe. Yeah, it was about 2 years. And then there was this E7, this gunnery sergeant in the Marine Corps. He was married to another gunny in another unit. And his wife came to visit us, and she came into our office. First off, it's all males. And so having a female in the office is strange. We're just a grunt battalion, and this lady comes in. She smells good, first off. We don't. That's the first thing you notice. And it's like, she smells nice. But yeah, we're in the company office and he sits down and he's just talking to her. They're just having a conversation. And for me, it was earth shattering for me because I was like, he's just talking to his wife. I honestly did not know how to do that, to my embarrassment. I'd been married for 2 years and I didn't know how to just sit and have a conversation. And now I look back and I see how patient my wife is. I'm like, wow, she had to put up with a lot for me. I just did not know how to speak to her. We talked. There was communication taking place, but I was never in a sympathy state where I'm just sitting and listening. And sympathy doesn't mean you're feeling sorry for the other person. It means you're listening to what they're saying. You're trying to understand where they're coming from. I just basically wasn't doing those little things. And so this guy sitting there, he is a hard-charging Marine. He's tough. He's built, but he sits down with his wife and they're just having a normal conversation between a husband and a wife. And that blew my mind. But it let me know, you know what? There's some things that I don't know. And since that time over the years, in interactions with people at church and other places, I've seen men who are good at interacting with their spouses. And I've told them, you know, hey, I need to get better about that. That's one of the things I'm thankful for is other men that I've been able to encounter that have been taught these things. And I've been able to pick up on stuff from them. I'm embarrassed that it's taking me until so late in life to start to halfway get a clue. But yeah, man. Master state versus sympathy state. That was earth-shattering for me. And I kind of had previews in the years leading up to now when this professional just sat down and said, oh yeah, well here it is, master versus sympathy state. And I went, oh, okay. And I'm sitting here taking notes while he's talking about it. And I'm like, you know what? I'm always in the mastery state with whoever I'm talking to. And it gets back into narcissism. I want to be doing the right thing, saying the right thing, saying something funny so they laugh and they like me. And that's not a good place to be. It's been good, man. I'm thankful for that. But neuroplasticity. And then the Stoa app. I found a smartphone app. It's called Stoa, S-T-O-A. It's Stoic Meditations. The developer of the application, they're looking back on ancient philosophy for Stoicism and stuff like that. Now, I don't buy into all Stoicism. So if you're a Christian friend of mine, don't get worried. I haven't fallen off the deep end here and I'm going off into other philosophies or whatnot. I'm still a Christian, but some of these meditative practices that the Stoics followed are helpful and they're very applicable and they're very good for Christianity as well. But anyways, the Stoa app, it takes you through daily guided meditations where it's just basic stuff like, hey, look, your suffering, a lot of it is really just your interpretation of the events that are taking place in your life. Really? And then they say, think about that for a minute. And you're walking through a guided meditation and it's like, Epictetus said this, and it's really just good stuff. And so you spend about 8 minutes doing a guided meditation, and it's been so helpful for me because it's basically telling me stuff that parallels what I've learned up to this point. And it's saying things like, a lot of things are just not up to you, and you need to focus on the things that are. Here's what's up to you, Todd. You need to focus on your response to what just happened to you, rather than, he did that to me. And then you read into it and you start imposing a story. That guy hates me. So my suffering, a lot of it is just self-inflicted. The Stoa app has been good for that, though. So that's been something I'm supplementing with. But we're not getting paid for recommending that app. I'm just throwing it out there. That's something I've used. So yeah, meditative practices. And meditation is something that's mentioned in the Bible because you'll go through and you'll hear that so-and-so was meditating at the dinner hour or whatever. Mm-hmm. But they don't really get into how you meditate. And so what's been very helpful for me in the last 2 years is, how do you actually meditate? And it's like going to the gym mentally. You're doing these exercises mentally to focus on truth and good things. And how do I focus on these responses throughout the day when bad things happen? So it's been good, man. I'm thankful for that.
Awesome. So you talked about a lot of things. How would you say could wrap a bow around that? How have those things affected you?
Oh, man. Good results on my part that I've noticed for myself and my wife has noticed. I'm more pleasant. Just bottom line. And my wife, she is such a saint. She is such a good person, so patient, but she's noticed the difference and she has talked to me about it. And she's like, hey, when are you meeting up with so-and-so again to talk about more stuff? Because I share what I'm learning in these sessions. And she's like, she wants to learn about it too. And it's been good, but I've been more pleasant because I have a lot less bitterness and resentment because I'm not imposing stories onto the events of life. And man, that's what we do, man. That's what I do. I don't know about you, but somebody does something and I read into it and I infer some sort of nefarious motivation on that other person's part. And then I'm bitter and resentful towards them. Dude, that's not good. I'm a lot less of that now. So I'm thankful for that.
Awesome.
And I'm not as troubled by people's disapproval. So that's good. I can deal with it better. And this is my own mental weakness here. The thought that someone may not like me, that would often disturb me. And that's not good. You need to be okay. You got to realize not everybody's going to like you, and that's okay. I have a lot less concern about what others think. Now, I don't want to be a jerk to people, but I realize I can't control what people think of me. So the only thing I can control is my own behavior, my own thoughts, my own responses. And then a Bible verse that stuck out to me in the middle of the year was this. It's Proverbs 14:30. It says, a tranquil heart gives life to the flesh, but envy makes the bones rot. And I realized that it's easy for me to just sit and start looking at others and start comparing myself and maybe seeing their social media posts and thinking, oh, wow, yeah, that's good. And then easily fall into envy or jealousy. And that is just not a healthy thing. It impacts your health. But the word tranquility is what stands out there. Tranquil heart, that just gives life. And that's what I am looking forward to more of and working toward. I'm not perfect and I will never be perfect in it, but I'm looking forward to that.
Awesome. That's good, man.
And again, I'm looking at the wave tops here of the last year. It's been a pretty rough year. And that's one of the reasons we named the podcast The Cluttered Path, because you have your plans and then you start off and then, man, things happen. My wife was in the hospital for 11 days in August. My daughter started college at the same time my wife was in the hospital. And it was pretty tough, but we made it through and I'm thankful for that.
It has a challenging year in lots of ways. So this has definitely been a highlight of it. And the cluttered path just resonated so much with both of us.
Right.
Because that's life.
Yeah. I think about when I left high school, I had visions of, oh, well, I'm going into the military and everything's going to be wonderful. And no, you have people. We're not perfect and there's friction wherever you go. And boot camp was a lot of friction. So actually planned friction. So
yeah.
But yeah, it's a cluttered path we walk. But we started the podcast this year and man, we're on episode 14 now. Started off with Genghis Khan, man, 7 episodes, did a book review, beat that horse to death. So it was.
But that was at the same time, I remember this is another word we used a lot, or at least I did, fascinate. That book was, and his life story was just.
Yeah. It
much
was,
to be,
man.
I mean, just a lot to learn and to be aware of. And things to take away from it. That's kind of why you picked it initially, was some big takeaways there.
Yeah, because by extension, I didn't realize it, but Genghis Khan's life had an impact on me because of that fellow Dan Hall, who told the story, a fictitious story about the Mangudai warriors, and got it in my head, the Mangudai warriors. Then as an adult, I began studying Genghis Khan, and I'm like, you know what? There's actually a heck of a lot more there than what he talked about, and this is really good stuff. That story, that person's life had a huge impact on me without anyone knowing, but it was good. And then that just gets into topics like leadership, personal development, finances. How do you conduct your life in a way that you are growing and not stagnating, not falling back into your natural state where you can get bitter and resentful and not productive and not doing anything useful for society? And that's where I'm headed as a person. I want to be doing something good for society. And it's nothing fantastical or great. As a human being, I want to be contributing to other people throughout my day and being a person that is helpful to others, because so many have done that for me. I just think about all the men and also ladies, teachers that have helped me out without even knowing it. Their influence has been huge for me. So I'm thankful for that. So next year, we're going to be delving into a lot of different topics. We've had now our first interview. Chris Wilkins was on the show. That was a lot of fun. I enjoyed interacting with him. We may be bringing Chris back to talk about some financial topics. He's definitely interested, so hopefully we can bring him back. You know what struck me about Chris is he shared his time with us, and he didn't have to, and he was willing to sit down and just talk. And he shared his story about the Battle of Fallujah and being a lieutenant in an infantry battalion. That was eye-opening for me because I was a sergeant, I was an NCO, I was a grunt in a platoon, and I had no visibility into what the officers do. They were separate from us. So it was good to hear what he went through. Next year, we're going to be talking about some financial topics. And hopefully people can get some good takeaways from that. And then after my review of my journal, I had to sit down and just think about things I'm thankful for. The primary thing is just more joy in relationship with my wife, my coworkers. Now I'm a bit more pleasant. And I'll go ahead and tell you, I was talking to my professional helper and I said, my wife is a lot more happy and she seems more joyful. And he's like, yeah, probably because you're a lot less of an asshole. And I was like,
put that out there.
I'm like, noted. And I went home and told my wife and she was like, yeah, you're a little bit less of that. So that's good. But yeah, man. So getting some more joy out of my relationships. Also thinking about in 2023, my daughter, she was having leg pains. And then my wife, so perceptive, she's thinking about the symptoms that my daughter was having. She's like, you know what? We need to take you in and get this thing scanned. We found out that she had a bone tumor. And they were like, look, we're sending you to an oncologist. Dude, that's scary. We're just like, what? Oncologist? I'm not trying to hear this. We took her to an oncologist. They're like, yeah, we don't know if it's cancer or not. We got to do surgery. We'll find out when we dig in there. Thankfully, it was not cancer, totally benign, but it was a growing tumor that had to come out. They got it out. They refilled the hole with cement. They filled it in, and she literally just got a scan in the last week, and everything is good. Everything is growing well.
That's awesome.
Thankful for that. And my daughter started college this fall. That is a huge life change for the home front, for me and my wife, and then also for my daughter. And we went on vacation to Hawaii as our last hurrah before my daughter left. And then my wife's back started hurting after the vacation. It got to the point where she spends 11 days in the hospital because of it. And my daughter was alone with me getting ready to pack up and head off to college. And I ended up taking her to college by myself. I spent a few days. I stayed in a hotel nearby. She stayed with me in the hotel until her roommate got there. It was tough because my daughter was really worried. And here's one of the cool things that happened. We were leaving the hotel one morning and there was a lady on the elevator with us, and the lady goes, are you a Liberty student? She goes to Liberty University. And my daughter said, yes. And the lady goes, yes, my daughter is starting too. I'm dropping her off here. And then I asked the lady the question, how is your daughter doing emotionally? And the lady just opened up and said, she's struggling. She's so worried. And that helped my daughter so much because she's like, I am too. So they just stood in the parking lot, my daughter and this lady, and they just talked. And I just kind of stepped back, and that was good. And then she was worried that she wouldn't do well in college and all this stuff. And she's worried about making friends. And I had the opportunity to talk to her and just go, you know what? You know how to study. You're organized. I think you're going to do okay. And you're kind of cool to hang out with, so I think you're going to make friends. She literally started day one and just had so much fun. It's to the point where she comes home and she's like, oh, I missed my bed at college. She's got a great roommate, so I'm happy for her.
Feels good when your kids are doing well.
And then the word serendipity comes to mind. Serendipitous things. These are fortuitous things that happen in your life, and you can only chalk it up to there's something out there. And I chalk it up to God. And I just think back on all the times, my feelings of inadequacy, feeling like an imposter, asking, am I on the right path? Should we have started this podcast? I start asking those questions, and then it's almost every time that I start doing that, there are these timely confirmations right after that question comes to mind. And then I'm just re-encouraged. Hey, get to work at whatever you have in front of you. Just do that work and don't try to boil the ocean mentally. Just work on right here where you are. And so I'm thankful for serendipity.
Awesome.
Well, what's coming up, man? 2025?
Man, it's going to be a wild year. Looks like our second son will be heading off to college. I'm a little concerned for myself because we have two boys. When the first went off to school,
Right.
man, I was legit pretty depressed for a good 6 weeks.
Oh, wow.
I think, yeah, that was traumatic. I did not expect, because my wife and I are all about trying to encourage the boys to go do their thing. We don't want to hold them back because we want them to be around or whatever. It's like we're both mentally prepared for these things to happen, and we fully expect them to in some fashion. And I was really surprised how hard that is. In some ways, because I have concerns about when number two, I don't know what he's doing. We're still kind of waiting and figuring out kind of what that looks like. But if he goes off somewhere, that could be a challenge for me.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's exciting.
I went through the similar thing when we dropped my son off at college. So I've got a son, he's the oldest, and a daughter who's 4 years younger. So we dropped our son off. I was sad. It hit me pretty hard. It was the first child leaving the nest. And I kind of went through the same thing. But with boys, they don't call you or anything. They're just like, bye. I don't know about your son, but yeah.
No, he was like, how about we talk in a month?
Exactly.
My wife piped up. She's like, how about 3 weeks?
Yes, that's so funny, man.
Yeah.
That's what happened, man. The boys, so we dropped Ryan off, my son. We're helping him get set up, and he's there with his roommate. He was actually roommates with his buddy from high school. So both of the moms are there helping, and the boys are just looking at us like, okay, you can leave now. We're ready to go hang out with our friends, so bye-bye.
Yep.
And it was so funny. And so we finally left. I was sad, but then dropping my daughter off, totally different experience, because first off, my daughter actually wanted to hang out with us, and she was sad that I was leaving. And when we parted ways, she was hanging on to me and crying. And dude, it ripped my heart out. But dropping her off was not as hard as dropping my son off, because I don't know if it was because I'd been through it before. And now I'm dropping my daughter off, and I'm like, okay, cool, she's going to be fine. I was worried for her because she was emotional. But man, she just picked up, and it was like, boom. She just jumped right in, and it's been fun for her. It's been good because my wife and I are now empty nesters, and it's nice that we can talk without ears around, and we can just hang out, and just the two of us. And
yeah.
It's been nice, man. So we do miss her, but she comes home like every couple of months at least. Yeah. And now she's home for the holiday break, and it's nice, man. And she's growing up, and it's good to see your kids growing up and becoming more independent and better able to take care of themselves.
That's awesome. Yeah, that would be great.
So I hope for you that the second child going to college is a easier experience.
He keeps threatening he's going to live here at home until he's 26 or something like that. But
yeah.
I don't know. We'll see. He's applied to a number of different schools, so it just depends on where he gets in and what he wants to do. So
see. Truth. So personally, looking forward to continuing building my skills at the relationship level, being able to interact better with my wife, my coworkers, with you, James, and being a better friend, better husband, better father, all of that. So those are the things that I'm going to be working on for 2025. And I don't do resolutions. I started having these New Year's resolutions because that's the thing to do. You're coming up on January. I'm going to hit the gym. And then you have all the New Year's resolutioners at the gym, and it's crowded for a couple of weeks, and then they peel off, and you're like, now we're back to. So I don't do resolutions because it's like a one-time thing. And then you don't meet up to your expectations, and then you feel like a failure. I have to realize I'm going to fail at this along the way, but I just got to keep inching forward and making some progress. And so it's almost like I've given myself a little leeway, realizing that I've got to get better, and I just got to keep moving the needle just a little bit as I go. It's happening. And next up for January, I do need to get my nutrition a lot more dialed in. I'm exercising, but, get the nutrition so that I can feel better. So personally, that's what I'm doing. Professionally, we're going to be growing this podcast, man. We're getting better at content development, and I'm learning a ton, man. The things that you don't know that you don't know.
Yeah. It's been a great learning experience, both for just the content and the podcast side. I love learning more about the audio stuff as well.
Yeah. I've been working on the video editing, and we're looking at marketing. We're looking at our social media aspects of this thing, and we have a long way to go. Just looking forward to episode topics. We're going to be doing things like personal development, mission and purpose type things, more stories, more history, do some guest interviews. And then as we see how things work and how the audience is responding, that's where we'll be dialing in, focusing on more specific topics. But for now, we're just going to keep telling stories about life, and with a goal of really just having a moral to the story to help ourselves grow and extend that out to others. It's been a great year, 2024. Looking forward to the next one.
Take the opportunity to invite our listeners. If you have feedback on topics you've heard or things that you'd like us to dig in a little more, please drop us a note. Feedback at clutterpath.com, or clutterpath.com will show you how you can contact us.
Yep. Or just send us a text right here in your podcast app. We'll definitely respond to it. So thanks for listening, folks. We're looking forward to 2025, and it's been a great year. We're thankful for you, and we hope you have a good day. We'll see you on the path.
Take care. Talk to you soon.